Alain Descamps, and I have about more than 38 years experience in a language called M, and I think I have now more than 4 hours experience in Lua. So if I write something wrong in Lua, please help me. Well, the database engine I am talking about is M, or also called MUMS. It looks quite old-fashioned, but it's a NoSQL database. There is an ISO standard who defines the working of the database and the language, and there are even more than one open source versions available. You should be, well, it's most of the time hidden somewhere, but if you go and get some cash money from a cash register, you probably talked to a MUMS machine. So there are very different people using MUMS as a database underneath. The Federal Police in Belgium, of course, the Library of the University Antwerp, which is my boss. It's also used in healthcare on different places all over the world. Financially, I think that 5 of the 10 biggest banks in the world are using MUMS as a database. There is also the Gaia space project. So the ESA, the European Space Agency, they sent a satellite that had one goal, to make a picture of the universe. So they sent it for about 4 or 5 years data to the Earth, and the data was collected in a MUMS database. And probably, but well, it's a rumor, but the metro in Kiev also uses a MUMS system to just, well, I don't know if it still works, but a MUMS system. Well, MUMS, or M, is in fact a thing that has 2 parts and they come together. It's a database and it's a programming language. The M database is really rock solid. There is everything you need for a good database inside it. It's transactional processing. You can do online backups. You can do mirroring. You can do anything. It's lightning fast. There has been, for example, the 1,000 financial transactions per second has been broken by MUMS systems. And it's really multi-user by nature. So the MUMS programming language and the database itself is meant to read and write simultaneously by multiple users, multiple jobs on the same time. Well, secure, if the finance is using MUMS, then it should be quite secure. I will not tell more about this. Well, actually, this is the Bismarckturm in Freiburg here. You can visit it if you still have some time. You need to find it because it's well hidden. Well, the MUMS language itself, it is actually built to access the MUMS database. It's direct, it's high speed, it's very simple, it's primitive. For example, every command in MUMS is 1 letter except the T. For the T there are 2 letters because the alphabet was almost plenty. And there are some quite philosophical similarities with Lua. But There are no coroutines. There are then, of course, no iterators. There are no classes. There are no batteries included. And, well, for a long time, the MEMS system had a philosophy that they were the only people in the world, and everything existed within MEMS. So the interoperability between M and the outside world is quite limited. But that's about the language, not about the database. So let's talk about Oasis. We started the revolution, and we built a new bridge to the MEMS database so that you can access the database with Lua. This Lua bridge to MEMS is it's open source. It's available on GitHub. There are still some things that are altered recently, but there is a working library there. It is based on YotaDB. YotaDB is an MEMS open source implementation which is also freely available. It is developed by initially by Mitchell Ballen, a guy who wrote TextAdept, which is a text editor completely written in Lua. So he knows something about Lua, I think. And it's further developed by Berwin Hoyt from New Zealand. He sends me a question, and the next day I will answer the question, and then so we have some kind of 24-hour conversation. And the project, the Lua Bridge to MEMS, is sponsored by the University of Antwerp. So we sponsored this project and we put it in open source. That's something that universities should do. So let's talk a little bit about MEMS syntax because and compare it to Lua. But it's just the less I'm telling you now, the more curious you will be, and that's the goal. So I will just tell just a little bit. So let's say you want to collect some metadata about books. Like, well, we are a library, so we collect metadata about books. So we start making a table. If there are any mistakes in my Lua code, please tell me, but so far so good. And so there can be many books in the database. So book number 40,502,527 seems to be, well, okay, you have some, it's a table on itself. And the book, of course, has a title, and the title of the book has also attributes. For example, it has a language code. It's in English, and the title can be Programming in Lua. And it can have other attributes like edition. The 4th edition is the best so far. Well, let me talk you some joke. Berwin was telling me, well, there is a new version, the 4th edition, it's really good. You should read it. And I said, well, I only have the 3rd edition in PDF. And he said, you should look into the library. I was laughing, and I looked through, I was doing a search in our catalog, and I found the 4th edition in our library. So thanks to the software that we developed to find the book. So let's do the same in mumps. I will. Well, the first thing that I say is you can. Every command in mumps is just 1 or 2 letters. You can write them full, like set, or you can say S, and real mumsers just make it so short that no mumsers can't read it. So what you can do is you can initialize a variable, and you don't have to initialize the tables in between. You just say I have a variable books, which has 3 subscripts, and I assign the value E and G to this subscripted variable. And to achieve the same thing as we have had in Lua, I know that I wrote it in 6 lines in Lua just to show that you can do it in 3 lines in mumps. I know that the Lua version was really very explicit, but it's just to show you that you don't have to declare something on the way. You just if you want to add something with 9 indexes or 12, you just can add it to the books. But there is more than that in mumps. And now the database is coming, because now we have some kind of table, let's say. If you add an up arrow to your variable, then your variable becomes a global variable. And the word global variable has nothing to do with global in the Lua syntax. Global means it's written on disk, it's permanent, and it's common for all the mumps processes that run on the same server, in the same environment, but okay. So if somebody alters this, the same data, well, the last one wins. That's very simple. These mumps global variables are very scalable. I will show, well, I have one reference from our database, which is a global that contains all the loan transactions. And so far, for the University Antwerp, we have loan transaction number 115,399,000, and probably more today. So it's scalable. Well, if we go to the Lua wrapper, we want to access the mumps database to the Lua wrapper, via Lua code and not via mumps code. So probably this will be the only mumps code that you ever will see in your life. You start doing this, m equals require iota_db. And then you can access a set function with, in fact, 3 variables. The first one is the name of the global. The second one is the subscripts. It's a table, it's a list if you want, and the value of it. And that's for the title, and that's for the books. So far, so good. So this works today. And more of it, there are 16 available functions now inside the iota_db module, and you can imagine what kind of functions you will there are. You can set, you can log, of course, just to see if someone else is altering the same data. And well, all you need there is, all you need to alter the database is there. But let's say this doesn't look very nice, or it can be better than that. So the future plans, and Berwin is already working on it. That is, and I'm really curious about what you think about it, to that mum's global variables act more like Lua tables. I don't want another type which says M global or something like that, but anyway, maybe maybe there are also already things possible with meta tables or things like that, so that the syntax, in fact, looks more, Lua-like or Lua naturally. The second thing that Berwin is developing now for us is the other way around, that is implementing Lua inside mums, so that we can access Lua code from mums from within the mum system. But that's more something that we will be happy about it. And the next thing we will do is just take a good project inside our library software system, try to make it in Lua, try to to push it on the edge, to see how reliable it is, how fast, and so on. Get some experience with Lua, and then probably, if that goes well, deploy Lua in a further statement in Brocade, which is the name of our library software system. But that's future, but the nearest future. So there is also an interesting proposal from Berwin, which Roberto, you should read, about the thing that I said about accessing tables, accessing mums globals as more as Lua-like objects. The rest is probably something you have to figure out yourself. Thank you for your attention. Any suggestions, questions?
It's more a comment than a question, but it shouldn't be any problem to have access to globals like Lua tables, just regular Lua syntax. Exactly using meta tables, as you said, it can automatically create those intermediate tables that you need in the way. So you should be able to just write the name of the. I think ideally you should use some global name for like the database, dot the name of the global, then the indices using regular square brackets equals something, and then it's exactly like the set common in one line that corresponds to the set common in mumps. You'd have the one line in an assignment in Lua doing the same thing.
And with the subscripts on the left side of the equal sign.
All of them, yes, like multiple, because exactly. Because the first table has a meta table, so when you try to index the first subscript, it's not there. It creates something that when you try to access and something is not there, then it creates something, and you can cache that, so do not have to create that every time you access the same intermediate tables. And so everything should work. I mean, very,
Okay.
very easily. And in the end, you just issue the commands you already have there. So this is only in Lua you do that. You don't have to change anything in the connection part with mumps.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that should
I
be quite.
will-
Yeah, I can help with that.
Definitely dive into that. Thank you. Other
I love
questions?
mumps. As long as I can continue calling it mumps and not M,
There are already at least two different languages called M.
Yes? Oh.
Two others.
and mumps is only one.
So actually, it's I will only say this once. It's a Massachusetts General Hospital multi-utility programming language. That's one multi too much. Massachusetts General Hospital Utility Multi-Programming System.
It's also the name of the illness in German.
It's the name of an illness, yes. And it was originally made for administration for hospitals. That's the original. Other questions?
I would have one. So, but M is running on very many systems. I think it's running on because all these communities, they have very different computers.
Well, I used to run M on MS-DOS a long time ago. We run M now on Unix systems, Linux, Red Hat. There is also a port to ARM, which is quite new, which is in YotaDB. So you can look and you can download it. It's open source.
Yeah, my question would be if you would really have the ambition to include Lua now into M,
Yes.
then you need to recompile this for every system which the M users use, or you need a different Excel for every system, don't you, Roberto? Or you could dream that you just include Lua into M, and then it runs on any of the systems. That's not possible. Huh? You would have to translate the interface to every such system. Yeah, if you have different computers. Yeah, okay. So you will have to do it for every computer, every computing system, or every computing type which you have.
You have to recompile it, but
Because you said you are in M already since '88, so you have to use very many computers. If you want to support all of them, that's a hard work, I think.
well, we don't support digital PDP-11
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
There used to be. No, I will not talk about used to be because then I'm getting old. I have to admit that I'm old. There used to be operating systems written in mumps, so that the only thing that was there was, yeah. And then you had. I remember that in old manuals there was such a paragraph to access magnetic tapes from mumps and how to do it was, but.
The thing I worked on that I told you it was like that. It was a machine that was a bare machine with mumps running.
Yeah.
So the system I told you that I worked many years ago was exactly that. Was a bare machine with mumps running on top of the the hardware. Was a
But the thing that I didn't.
Z8000 CPU.
Yeah, the first machine, mumps machine,
And mumps
it was on
running.
a 6809 Motorola 8-bit machine, which called smoke signal, and sometimes there was a smoke signal because the hardware failed or something like that. Yeah. Well, it's still interesting because you can still run a mumps program that you wrote in 1986 without changing the syntax. It will run faster on the modern computers, but so the durability, or how do you call it? Your investment in code lasts, and that is something that is people are rediscovering now, that that's a benefit, because sometimes every time that you install a new version of your programming language and you have to rewrite code and things like that, well, that's sometimes the time that you don't have.
So you showed this syntax to write entries into the MUMPS database.
Yes.
So I wonder, Lua itself has the capability to represent databases. You have nested table structures. Yes, you can make tables. Inside the tables, you make other tables, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you plan, or maybe it's even possible now, to write such a table directly in one single step to the MUMPS database. Surely there's no one-to-one mapping possible, but I would think it's rather clear that you have a Lua database or table, yes, and maybe you want to do it, to write it and even retrieve it from the database where you have a Lua table.
Well, there is actually there is a MUMPS instruction to merge these things, and it's called merge, of course. And I have to look because I don't know, probably Berwin, one of the 16 functions that he delivered is the merge command, and I have to look and dive into it how he developed this, but probably this will be an answer to your question. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I have to look.
Thank you.
You just mentioned that you could still run the same program that was written decades ago on a database. Now, yet you're investing in a Lua binding to access it from Lua. So why are you changing to Lua? Seems contradictory.
Well, there's more in life than performance. And there are other things. I mean, for example, let's say, let's talk about, if you talk about library, you talk about character encodings, and we have to register Chinese books and French books and with and without umlaut and things like that. So you talk about UTF-8 and things like that. The MUMPS strings are just bytes, so you can do anything you want with it. And I love this. You can put some binary code in it if you want. But you need extra functions to to interpret this as UTF-8, to see the length and so on. So you have to develop it yourself. And of course, because you use a scripting language, you get probably a slower performance for these. Even when the strings are very long, you could get a very slow mechanism to calculate the length of a string, the length in characters, not the length in bytes, and so on. And if you can ask Lua to calculate that for you, then probably it will be faster. You have also, we have written the SHA1 algorithm in MUMPS, and I can tell you that it's slower than in C. But that's also a thing that we like to do, is that we always have a standard MUMS version that works, so that we are not, if something happens with the C function or external things that we use, we are always, we have a slower version that always works for the future. So.
Written in the 80s.
No, SHA1 is not from the 80s.
That's from later. Yeah, thanks.
But we didn't write SHA 512 in MUMS, where we just did it the other way. There is another question.
I have a suggestion because I worked with a system SAS. Do you know it? SAS?
SAS.
It's also a database system, but it's more than a database system. I think it can be compared with MMAPS, because the philosophy is also to have the code running out of the 15 and 60, etc. The code is persisting. You must not change the code, but they have a macro language in it, and they saw that it is not so practical, and so they integrated Lua in it. Yeah. And they have the proc Lua procedure, and when you you want to see how other persons made it, perhaps it's a good remarks for you.
Yes, well, I mentioned that there are no iterators in MUMS. So we were quite creative, and we did something that, well, looked like iterators but weren't. So if you can use Lua to do only to do this, then you will have better code, probably. Yes.
Yes.
In fact, in reality, we are not writing native MUMS. But we also built some kind of meta language on top of MUMS, which generates MUMS code. So in fact, in runtime, there is only MUMS code that is executed. Yeah. But that's a story that I could tell you next year about it. I can talk about it for a few hours if you want. Okay. Thank you very much.